Tonight, everything fell into place. The late nights, the cryptic smiles, the way Claire's phone was always just a little too far out of reach when I was around. For months, I had felt it, like a whisper in the back of my mind, a shadow just out of sight. But now, I had proof. It wasn't that I went looking for it. Not exactly. Claire had been in the shower when her work bag tipped over in the rush of steam and carelessness. Papers spilled out, along with a sleek black phone I had never seen before. My first thought was that it must have been a mistake, something she had picked up by accident. But then it lit up, vibrating against the hardwood floor. One new message from Jake. The name alone sent a pulse of something sharp through me. Jake? I stared at the phone, my heart hammering. It could be nothing. A coworker, a friend, some missed call that meant absolutely nothing at all. But the part of me that had spent the last few months drowning in doubt knew better. I picked it up. The screen was unlocked. Jake, I need to tell Mark soon. I can't keep leading him on. My breath stalled in my throat. Mark. That was me. I read the words again, slower this time, as if they might change. As if I had misread them in the first dizzying wave of shock. But no, it was clear. Claire wasn't just cheating on me. She was lying to him, too. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I scrolled up. Dozens of messages. Some flirty, some mundane. Some that made my skin crawl. Last night was incredible. I hate sneaking around, but you're worth it. I wish I could just tell him the truth. The truth? What truth? That I was the fool in this story? The sound of water shutting off snapped me back to reality. I barely had time to put the phone back before Claire stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her skin still glistening from the heat. She smiled at me, warm, familiar. Hey, babe, she said, running a hand through damp hair. Everything okay? I looked at her. At the woman I had shared a life with for 6 years. The woman I had built a future with. I forced a smile. Yeah, everything's fine. But it wasn't. And soon, she'd know it too. I didn't sleep that night. Claire curled up beside me like she always did, her breath slow and steady against my shoulder, as if nothing had changed. As if she weren't carrying a second life in the palm of her hand. As if she weren't whispering secrets to another man while sharing my bed. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind a hurricane of questions. Who was Jake to her? How long had this been going on? And what the hell did she mean by leading me on? I wanted answers. I wanted them now. But I knew better than to charge in blindly. Claire was clever, too clever. She'd spin a story, flash those sad eyes, tell me half-truths wrapped in just enough honesty to make me doubt myself. No, I wouldn't let her control the narrative. So I did what any betrayed man would do. I waited. The morning after, Claire kissed me goodbye the next morning like she always did, her lips soft against mine, her fingers lingering just long enough to convince me that nothing was wrong. If I hadn't seen those messages, I might have believed her. She grabbed her purse, her work bag, the one that still held her secret phone, and walked out the door. I waited exactly 10 minutes before I grabbed my keys and followed. Her office was downtown. A sleek glass building filled with people in tailored suits and manufactured smiles. But Claire didn't go there. I stayed 3 cars behind her, watching as she took a different route, one that led her not to the office but to a small cafe on the other side of town. She parked, stepped out of the car, and adjusted her coat like this was just another normal day. Then, as if on cue, he arrived. Jake. Tall, dark-haired, polished. The kind of guy who looked like he had a trust fund and a six-pack without trying. He walked up to her with a confidence that made my hands clench into fists. And Claire, my wife, my best friend, the woman who promised me forever, smiled. Not the forced smile she'd been giving me lately. Not the tired, distracted one that barely reached her eyes. No, this was real, bright, alive. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. My stomach twisted as she leaned in, her fingers brushing his arm, her voice low and intimate. And just like that, I had my answer. The plan. I could have stormed in right then, could have flipped the table, shattered the illusion, demanded the truth in front of a room full of strangers. But that would be letting her win. She had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. Whatever game she was playing, Whatever twisted web she had spun, I wasn't going to be the fool who walked straight into it. No, if Claire wanted to play games, I'd make sure I was the one setting the rules. So I took out my phone, snapped a picture, then another, and another. Evidence. Because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about revenge. I spent the rest of the day with my phone in my hand, staring at the pictures. Claire and Jake, sitting close, their hands brushing, the way she looked at him, like he was the only man in the world. It should have made me sick. It should have made me feel powerless. Instead, it did something else. It made me sharp. That night, I lay in bed beside Claire, listening to her breathing, feeling the warmth of her body next to mine. I could have confronted her then, forced her to confess. But she would lie. She would cry. She would twist the truth until I was the villain for even suspecting her. No, I needed more than the truth. I needed to own it. And that meant finding Jake. The meeting. I didn't have to wait long. Claire left early the next morning, saying she had a team meeting at work. I smiled, kissed her cheek, and pretended not to know that her work meeting was 6 feet tall and waiting for her at a hotel across town. By the time she was gone, I already had a plan. I found Jake the way anyone would, through social media. He was easy to track down. Too easy. His profile was filled with pictures of expensive cars, expensive drinks, and a carefully curated image of a man who thought he had the world at his feet. He had no idea that his world was about to collapse. I sent him a message. Me? We need to talk. About Claire. Jake. Who the hell is this? Me. Her husband. Silence. Then, after a long pause, Jake. Meet me at Mercer's bar. 9 p.m. The truth comes out. Mercer's was the kind of place where people went to disappear. Dim lighting, cheap drinks, the quiet hum of bad decisions in the air. I got there first, ordered a whiskey, and waited. Jake arrived 5 minutes late. Up close, he was exactly what I expected. Polished, confident, the kind of guy who never had to try too hard. But there was something else, too. Something tight in his expression. Doubt. He slid into the booth across from me, studying me like I was some kind of puzzle. All right, he said. Let's hear it. I took out my phone, scrolled to the pictures, and placed it on the table. His face dropped. His fingers hovered over the screen, his jaw tightening as he stared at the evidence of his affair. Jesus, he muttered. You had no idea, did you? I said, watching him carefully. He didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he exhaled. No, I didn't. He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. She told me you two were separated. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Separated? Yeah. She said she was trying to figure out how to tell you, that she didn't want to hurt you. It was almost funny, the way she had played us both, the way she had carefully constructed 2 different lies, spinning them so perfectly that neither of us had seen the cracks until now. Jake leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. I feel like an idiot. I studied him, the way his shoulders sagged, the way his entire reality had just shifted. I recognized it. I had lived it. And in that moment, an idea hit me. She's been lying to both of us, I said slowly. But what if, for once, we control the lie? Jake looked up, wary but interested. What are you saying? I smiled. I'm saying, let's make her pay. Jake wasn't convinced at first. He leaned back in the booth, arms crossed, studying me like I was the one who had betrayed him. You want revenge, he said slowly. That's what this is about. I didn't deny it. I want the truth, I corrected. And I want her to face it. He exhaled, rubbing his jaw. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? I had spent the entire day thinking about that question. I had imagined countless confrontations, yelling, accusations, maybe even throwing a drink in her face for dramatic effect. But that wasn't good enough. Claire was too good at lying, too good at twisting the truth until she came out looking like the victim. If I stormed in, demanded answers, she'd cry, say it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. I needed something she couldn't escape from. I leaned in, lowering my voice. We set her up. We make her think she's getting away with it, let her feel safe. And then we take it all away. Jake was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he let out a dry laugh. Jesus, he muttered, shaking his head. I should be pissed at you. You should be, I agreed. But you're not. Because you hate being lied to just as much as I do. His jaw tightened. I could see the anger flickering behind his eyes. It was different from mine. Mine had been simmering for months, quiet and patient. His was fresh, raw, like an open wound. That was good. I needed him angry. All right, he said finally. Tell me what you have in mind. I smiled. First, we make her believe nothing has changed, I said. We both act normal. No suspicion, no fights, nothing that makes her think we know the truth. And then, I paused, letting the words sink in. Then we invite her to dinner. The perfect setup. I waited until later that night to set the plan in motion. Claire came home late, as usual. I was in the kitchen, nursing a beer, scrolling through my phone like nothing was wrong. She walked in, dropping her purse by the door, stretching like she had just endured a long, exhausting day. Hey, babe, she said, walking over to kiss my cheek. I let her. Hey, I said casually. I was thinking we should go out this weekend. Just the two of us. Dinner, maybe? Her eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised. Really? I nodded. Yeah, we haven't had a proper date night in a while. She hesitated, just for a second, just long enough for me to see it. That flicker of guilt, of hesitation. Was she wondering how to balance me and Jake? Wondering which lie she would have to tell to make this work? Then she smiled. That sounds perfect. I smiled back. Good. I already made a reservation. She had no idea I had booked a table for 3. Jake's role. The next morning, I texted Jake. Me? She took the bait. Jake? Damn. That was fast. Me? She thinks it's just me. She has no idea you'll be there. Jake? This is insane. Me? You in or not? Jake? I'm in. It was happening. We were going to trap her in her own lies. At dinner, Claire would walk in expecting a romantic evening with her clueless husband. Instead, she would find both of us. No excuses. No escape. Just the brutal, undeniable truth. And this time, she wouldn't be the one controlling the story. The night before the dinner, Claire was radiant. She hummed in the shower, took her time picking out an outfit, even curled up beside me on the couch and rested her head on my shoulder like we were still in love. Like she wasn't about to walk into the most carefully constructed nightmare of her life. I let her. I played my part. But beneath my steady hands and calm voice, my pulse pounded like a war drum. Jake and I had planned every detail. The where, the when, the timing. All that was left was the execution. The dinner reservation was set for 8 p.m. at Belmont's, a high-end place just intimate enough that a confrontation wouldn't turn into a public spectacle, but not so private that she could talk her way out of it. Jake would arrive 5 minutes after us, long enough for Claire to settle in, to believe the illusion. Then boom, the bomb drops. The hours before. That morning, Claire kissed me goodbye, oblivious to the fact that tonight would be the last time she ever lied to my face without consequence. I love you, she said, flashing a smile as she grabbed her coat. I almost laughed. Love you too, I replied, and it tasted like poison. As soon as she left, I texted Jake. Me? You ready? Jake. Ready as I'll ever be. Me? Remember, no blowing up. We control this. Jake? Yeah. But if she tries to lie to my face, I swear to God. Me? That's exactly what she'll do. That's why we have the evidence. Jake? See you at 8. I exhaled. Tonight, everything would change. Dressing the part. I picked a dark navy suit, sharp and calculated. A man in control. A man who wasn't about to beg or plead or ask why. By the time Claire got home, she was glowing. She wore a black dress I hadn't seen in months, maybe longer. One that hugged her curves perfectly. The kind of dress she used to wear for me. I wondered if she had worn it for him too. You look stunning, I said smoothly, adjusting my tie in the mirror. She turned, giving me a slow, appreciative smile. You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Bennett. If only she knew. She looped her arm through mine as we headed out, completely unaware that she was walking straight into a trap. Belmont's was the kind of restaurant where people whispered over candlelit tables, where everything from the wine to the silence was expensive. Claire had always loved places like this, places that made her feel important, untouchable. Tonight, she wouldn't be untouchable. The hostess led us to a table near the center of the room, where the lighting was just dim enough to set the mood but not dark enough to hide the truth. Claire slid into her seat gracefully, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. "Wow," she said, scanning the menu with a pleased smile. "You really went all out." I poured us both a glass of wine, my hand steady. "Of course. You deserve it." She laughed lightly, running her fingers along the rim of her glass. "You're being extra sweet tonight." I smirked. Well, I wanted tonight to be memorable. She had no idea how right I was. The arrival. 8:05 p.m. Jake was 5 minutes late. Perfect. Claire was mid-sentence, telling me some story about work when I saw the moment her world cracked. She froze. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass, her lips parting slightly as she registered the familiar figure striding toward our table. "Jake." She turned, her entire body stiff as he pulled out the empty chair across from her and sat down. For a moment, no one spoke. Claire's face drained of color. Jake didn't smile. Neither did I. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked smoothly, swirling my wine like nothing was out of the ordinary. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She blinked rapidly, as if trying to reboot her brain, scrambling for an escape. What's going on?" Her voice wavered, her panic barely contained. Jake leaned back, arms crossed. "I think we should be asking you that." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see her mind racing, calculating, trying to find the right words, the right lie, the right exit. But there was none. The confrontation. Claire's hands shook as she set her glass down. "Mark, what is this?" I leaned in slightly, my voice calm, controlled. "This is what happens when the truth comes knocking." Her eyes darted between us. I don't understand." Jake scoffed. "Cut the crap, Claire. We know." Her breath hitched. The moment stretched between us, thick with undeniable truth. She could lie to me. She could lie to him. But she couldn't lie to both of us. "How long?" I asked, my voice quieter now, sharper. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her silence was the real confession. Jake let out a cold laugh. "Jesus, I actually thought you loved me." Claire flinched, her face contorting in desperation. "Jake, I do. It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" His voice was pure venom. "You told me you were leaving him, that you were just waiting for the right moment, that he—" Jake shot me a look, something like pity flickering in his eyes, "that he was holding you back." I didn't move, didn't flinch. Claire reached for my hand across the table. "Mark, please, I can explain." I pulled away, slowly, deliberately. "You don't get to explain," I said. "You've done enough talking." Claire's breath quickened. I could see the realization finally sinking in. She had lost. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. Claire sat frozen, her breath uneven, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Jake's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might snap. I could see it now, the way his betrayal had shifted from shock to rage. And me? I felt calm, because for the first time in months, I was in control. "You know," I said, picking up my wine glass, taking my time, "I actually believed you." Claire's eyes snapped to mine, wide and desperate. "Mark, please." I ignored her, kept going. I believed the late nights, the extra meetings at work. I believed that when you turned your phone screen away from me, it was just a habit. That when you smiled less, when you kissed me out of routine instead of passion, it was just stress. I tilted my head, looking at her like she was a stranger. But it wasn't stress, was it? Claire's lips trembled. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Jake scoffed. "Oh, spare me. That's the best you've got?" Her eyes darted between us, like a trapped animal searching for an escape. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," she whispered. She swallowed hard. I was confused. Jake let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Confused? No, Claire. Confused as forgetting where you parked your car. This was a goddamn plan. She turned to me, pleading. Mark, you know I love you. That almost made me laugh. Instead, I leaned forward, my voice steady, controlled. No, Claire. You love the life I built for you. The stability, the comfort. You love having someone who never questions you. But me? I shook my head. You stopped loving me a long time ago, didn't you? She flinched. And that was the answer. The truth was finally sinking in. She had nothing left to say. The final blow. Jake pushed back from the table abruptly, the chair screeching against the polished floor. I can't believe I actually thought we had something real. Claire reached for him, desperation creeping into her voice. Jake, please. He yanked his arm away like her touch disgusted him. Don't. Just don't. She was losing him. And now? It was my turn. I pulled out my wallet and tossed a few bills onto the table. Then I stood, smoothing out my suit jacket. Claire looked up at me, eyes glassy. Mark, don't do this. I smiled. Cold. Sharp. Final. You already did. And with that, I walked away. I didn't look back. I stepped out of the restaurant into the cold night air, inhaling deeply. For the first time in months, maybe even years, my chest didn't feel tight. Behind me, Claire was still sitting at the table, stunned, broken. Jake had stormed off in the opposite direction, shoving past the waitstaff, his anger barely contained. And me? I was free. The streetlights stretched long shadows across the pavement as I walked toward my car. My mind should have been racing, replaying every word, every expression, every moment Claire realized she had lost. But instead, there was silence. A strange, weightless emptiness. I had spent so long drowning in doubt, in pain, in her, that I had forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. Now I was just me. I reached my car, gripping the roof for a moment before exhaling sharply. Then, my phone buzzed. Claire. I let it ring. Then, another message. Claire. Mark, please. Just talk to me. Then another. Claire. You don't understand. It wasn't just lies. I swear to you. I love you. I clenched my jaw. Funny how she found her love only after she lost everything. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. I could drive home, sleep in a bed that still smelled like her, stare at the walls we decorated together, let the memories consume me. Or, I could leave it all behind. I glanced at my phone again. The messages sat there, desperate, unanswered. I deleted them. Then, for the first time that night, I smiled. The next morning, I woke up alone. No Claire's arm draped over my chest. No soft breathing beside me. Just silence. And for the first time in a long time, I liked it. The sun streamed through the blinds as I stretched, letting the reality settle over me. It was over. Really over. There was no fixing this, no pretending. Claire had destroyed what we had, and I had walked away before she could sink her claws in deeper. I checked my phone. 5 missed calls. 8 unread messages. All from her. I didn't read them. Just seeing her name on my screen made my stomach twist, but not with sadness. Not even anger. Disgust. The woman I had built a life with had spent months playing me for a fool. And now, she wanted to talk? Now, she wanted to explain? Too late. I got up, made coffee, and stared out the window. It felt like the first clear morning in years. I had no idea what my life was supposed to look like now. No Claire. No marriage. Just me. And somehow, that didn't scare me. I grabbed my phone and did the one thing I should have done the moment I found that second phone. Blocked her. Then I exhaled. It was time to start over. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks without Claire's voice filling the house. Without her perfume lingering in the hallway. Without the weight of her lies pressing down on my chest. At first, it felt strange, like I was walking through the ruins of a life I no longer belonged to. But then, something shifted. The silence? It wasn't emptiness. It was peace. I went back to the gym, started sleeping better, cleaned out the apartment, throwing away every reminder of her. Her clothes, her stupid scented candles, the framed pictures where we looked happy but weren't. And every time I tossed something into the trash, I felt lighter. Then one evening, I ran into Jake. An unexpected encounter. I was sitting at a bar downtown, nursing a whiskey, when a familiar voice cut through the noise. Didn't expect to see you here. I turned, and there he was, the other guy. Jake looked better. Less angry. Less like a man whose world had been shattered. Maybe because he, like me, had realized that losing Claire wasn't a loss. I smirked. Didn't think you were the type to drink alone. He shrugged, sliding onto the bar stool beside me. I'm not. Just celebrating. Celebrating what? He raised his glass. That I dodged a bullet. I let out a low chuckle. I'll drink to that. We clinked glasses, two men who had been played by the same woman but had come out the other side wiser. Jake took a sip, then eyed me carefully. So, what's next for you? I exhaled, leaning back in my seat. I don't know, I admitted. But whatever it is, it's mine. And this time, no one's gonna take it from me. Jake smirked. Good answer. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. 1 month. That's how long it had been since I walked out of that restaurant and left Claire behind. Since I stopped being a fool in her game. The calls had stopped. The messages had finally dried up. And yet, somehow, I knew it wasn't over. I was right. It happened on a quiet afternoon. I had just come back from a run, sweat dripping down my back, my thoughts clear for the first time in weeks. I stepped into my building, nodding at the doorman, when I saw her. Claire. She was sitting on the steps, wrapped in that familiar gray coat, her hands gripping the strap of her purse like it was the only thing keeping her together. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, red-rimmed, pleading. I didn't stop walking. Mark, wait. I hesitated, just for a second, but that was all she needed to push herself up and close the distance between us. I know I'm the last person you want to see, she said, voice trembling. You are, I said flatly. She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening on her purse. I just need you to hear me out. I crossed my arms, staring down at the woman who once meant everything to me. Now, she was a stranger wearing Claire's face. You have 30 seconds. She flinched but nodded. I messed up, she whispered. I was selfish. I hurt you in ways I can never take back. But, Mark, I swear, I never wanted to lose you. I let out a short, humorless laugh. That's funny, because you sure as hell acted like you did. Her breath hitched, but I didn't stop. You didn't just cheat, Claire. You didn't just lie. You built a whole other life behind my back. You let me sleep next to you every night, knowing you were breaking me piece by piece. Tears welled up in her eyes. I know. I shook my head. No, Claire, you don't. Because if you did, you wouldn't be standing here, asking for forgiveness you don't deserve. Silence stretched between us. Her lips parted, a desperate response on the tip of her tongue, but I didn't care. I stepped around her, walking up the stairs, leaving her behind for good. She didn't follow. She didn't call out my name. Because we both knew, this was the end. And I wasn't looking back. I didn't turn around. Not once. Not when Claire sniffled behind me. Not when she whispered my name one last time, barely audible over the street noise. Not even when I reached my apartment door, knowing that if I looked back, she'd still be there. Because Claire no longer mattered. She wasn't my burden to carry. Not my responsibility to fix. She had broken us. And now, she had to live with it. I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, and exhaled. That was it. The last chapter. I had spent so long clinging to a woman who never really loved me. A marriage that had died long before I was willing to admit. And now? Now, I was finally free. I walked to the window and glanced down at the street. Claire was still standing there, looking lost, defeated, small. For a split second, a part of me, the old me, felt sorry for her. Then I turned away. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I wasn't her husband anymore. I wasn't her fool anymore. And I sure as hell wasn't looking back. I poured myself a drink, sat down, and let the silence of my new life settle around me. It didn't feel empty. It felt like a beginning. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.